More than 40 Russian main battle tanks and over 100 armored fighting vehicles have been obliterated in recent months, marking one of the bloodiest periods of armored devastation in modern combat. These hard figures represent relentless attempts to force a breakthrough using massive mechanized assault columns that were designed to strike fast, crush defensive lines, and dictate the battle through sheer weight and momentum. Instead, we are seeing these thrusts end in brief, brutal clashes where entire columns are frozen, split apart, and wiped out long before reaching their objective lines. Ukrainian forces no longer operate in the dark or guess enemy intent because constant aerial surveillance detects movement early, maps routes in real time, and exposes armored columns way before direct contact. Once spotted, these units lose all surprise, shed tactical cohesion, and get trapped in choke points and lethal minefields. The strategic risk for Moscow goes far beyond burned-out metal. Every failed armored push bleeds elite crews, burns through scarce armor reserves, and forces commanders to recycle failed, predictable tactics. Our analysis of this operational shift is critical, explaining why massive offensives that look devastating on paper disintegrate so rapidly on the ground. A vital tactical question remains unanswered in this new era of drone warfare and coordinated firepower. Can massive tank and carrier thrusts still achieve breakthroughs, or has modern warfare evolved past them? Russian high command still relies on massive mechanized formations, aiming to overwhelm defenses through sheer speed, mass, and continuous, multi-axis advances across several sectors of the front lines simultaneously. During recent pushes, mixed armor columns of tanks and carriers have been shoved hard through dense forest screens, village outskirts, and tight dirt tracks, desperate to overstretch the Ukrainian line before a counterstrike can organize. These drives must strike fast, pack tight, and maintain brutal, forward momentum as commanders rely on shock and mass to fracture the defensive lines. Once committed, these columns cannot stop, as halting forfeits the initiative and leaves stalled tanks dead in the sights of enemy spotters. Stand by. The operational doctrine is clear. Armor must advance, absorb enemy fire, and deliver assault infantry, while artillery provides trailing suppression. But the brutal reality on the ground exposes how this doctrine fails under 24/7 aerial surveillance. As these columns advance, they are forced onto highly predictable choke points dictated by terrain, dense woods, and paved roads, strangling their maneuver options before a shot is fired. Forests funnel tanks into single-file lanes. Villages force sharp turns and deceleration, while wrecked infrastructure blocks alternative bypasses for 50-ton vehicles. Once committed to an axis, turning back or dispersing is nearly impossible, particularly when vehicles pack tightly to maintain speed and combat cohesion. This tight packing is meant to protect them, but it actually concentrates targets in a killing zone where the enemy holds absolute aerial visibility. During the push, commanders prioritize momentum over battlefield adaptation, blindly betting that sheer volume will shatter Ukrainian lines. Assault troops ride crammed inside personnel carriers, ready for rapid dismounts, while combat engineers and logistics trail the spearhead. The battle order looks lethal on paper, but depends entirely on flawless timing, synchronized coordination, and non-stop momentum. Once that momentum is broken, the armored column does not retreat gracefully. It instantly disintegrates in brutal, highly visible phases. First, the advance stalls against obstacles and rough ground. Next, vehicles bunch up to close gaps, desperately seeking mutual protection in a confined space. At this exact moment, the target profile peaks, becoming highly predictable and completely trapped on its axis. Yet, despite catastrophic losses in identical operations, Moscow repeats this doctrine because tactical options are sparse and pressure must be maintained. Russian commanders must test defensive lines, pin Ukrainian reserves in place, and probe for weak spots along a massive front. Light recon forces cannot force these results, so high command commits heavy armor, fully aware of the meat grinder ahead. Down in the mud, crews are ordered into a blind tactical maze, completely exposed to the eyes in the sky. Hostile armor is pushing forward. Betting speed can outrun lethal exposure. but that extreme velocity chokes their reaction time when conditions shift. The moment contact is made, escape routes vanish, and there is zero space to disperse or adjust. That is precisely why these brutal assaults fail to yield breakthroughs, despite inflicting heavy damage or forcing local retreats. They unleash pure chaos and thunder, yet they fail to alter the strategic layout of this war. Instead, they prove that legacy mechanized tactics are completely obsolete against constant drone surveillance and instant high-precision artillery strikes. Ukrainian forces have completely revolutionized early-phase defense, deploying massive drone networks to track Russian columns long before contact, snatching tactical control right out of their hands. The second those Russian heavy columns roll out, our overhead assets lock down a massive battlefield picture that ground scouts simply cannot match as these drones hover high above the tree lines, ruins, and valleys that mask enemy movements from direct sight. These eyes in the sky do not rush to strike, prioritizing reconnaissance above all else. They map out routes, confirm enemy behavior, and target the narrow choke points heavy armor must navigate. When hostile columns squeeze into dense forests and villages, their options evaporate, making live aerial tracking absolutely lethal. Repetitive movement down identical corridors leaves massive heat signatures, prompting operators to lock onto key intersections, including dirt roads, fields, and gaps in terrain. These are the fatal funnels where tanks and armored vehicles must decelerate. Once that route is mapped, tactical drones establish non-stop surveillance, feeding real-time tracking data to Ukrainian defense units minute by minute. This total battlefield visibility eliminates the fog of war, ensuring headquarters never has to guess where the enemy will strike next. Simultaneously, live first-person view feeds stream straight to combat units, uniting scout teams with heavy artillery batteries and anti-tank missile squads lying in wait. Deploying hidden minefields is vital here, with aerial intelligence predicting exactly where those hostile vehicles will bottleneck. Instead of blind mining operations, the military uses aerial scouting to funnel enemy armor. As Russian battalions commit to these killing zones, hunter-killer drones verify their intervals, speed, and order, mapping out exactly how trapped they really are. Consequently, the invading force loses all elements of surprise, miles before reaching our defensive lines. Before the lead tanks even reach the defense perimeter, Ukrainian commanders already identify the scouts, infantry carriers, and rear support. This vital intel lets them coordinate fire support plans instantly. We eliminate split-second panic in the trenches. Russian armor now faces a brutal reality where every shift is exposed. But breaking off from their designated advance is impossible. Retreating creates massive traffic jams, dispersing triggers landmines, and halting invites immediate artillery barrages. That constant hum of rotors overhead forces enemy crews to realize they are targeted, crushing morale before the first shell drops. As momentum collapses, the entire tactical advantage swings to Ukraine, forcing the hostile units to react to a combat zone they do not control. Drone-directed reconnaissance completely neutralizes deception, as tactical feints and diversions are immediately flagged by continuous tracking systems. Deploying smokescreens or utilizing terrain masking fails instantly against advanced thermal optics and overhead sensors. An assault that looks formidable on tactical maps looks like a slow-motion target run to our operators. When that threshold is crossed, the attackers stop dictating the battle, marching straight into a pre-registered kill zone. Modern combat now rewards discipline and timing over raw speed, allowing defenders to choose exactly where to unleash hell. Under these conditions, unmanned aircraft are not mere equipment, they are the vital link binding recon, command, and lethality. By weaponizing real-time visibility and immediate intelligence, Ukraine transforms early detection into a devastating force multiplier, dictating every single engagement. As soon as Russian heavy armor reaches these bottleneck zones, Ukrainian anti-tank teams hammer the lead vehicles and command elements. This single brutal tactical action paralyzes the entire column. That lead tank dictates the pace, vector, and survival rate of every system trailing behind it. Neutralize it, and you freeze the entire beast. Stay tuned for further battle updates. The moment that lead vehicle is hit and neutralized, the entire column loses more than just armor. It loses momentum, situational awareness, and combat confidence all at once. Trailing crews are suddenly forced to decide: do they halt, try to bypass the smoking wreck, or blindly press forward? On this narrow terrain, every single choice is a death trap. As smoke and debris choke the air, comms break down under frantic radio traffic while visual contact vanishes. Command tracks, riding close to the front to direct the assault, get caught in the chaos, instantly exposing themselves as high-value targets for waiting gunners. When these command assets are neutralized, tactical coordination shatters, orders stop flowing, and small units are left completely isolated. Drivers freeze. Gunners wait for orders that never come, while infantry inside trapped troop carriers hesitate to dismount into the unknown. This panic ripples backward through the column, compressing the line as panicked crews bunch up for safety. Right now, even intact armor is useless. Their survival relies on collective movement, not fighting as isolated targets. Knocking out that point vehicle also strips away the tactical buffer that absorbs the initial contact, forcing rear units to engage threats they are totally unprepared to face. Crews are forced to fight for their lives while maneuvering around a burning wreck. Veering off track means hitting mines, while backing up guarantees a blind collision in the jam. With momentum utterly shattered, Ukrainian defense forces do not need to rush. Time itself is now a lethal weapon. Supporting infantry remains trapped inside their armored hulls far longer than expected, because spilling out into an active kill zone is virtual suicide. This paralyzes efforts to clear the nearby fields and open sectors around this contested city. Meanwhile, that burning lead vehicle serves as a perfect beacon, signaling that the entire convoy is dead in the water. Once pinned down, the unit becomes sitting ducks as their options vanish. Trying to push backup armor forward is a fool's errand. They must run the exact same deadly gauntlet on a choked path. Even if reinforcements arrive, they only inherit the chaos. With command severed, junior officers are forced to act alone, causing completely uncoordinated movements across the line. Some crews desperately try to ram through, others freeze, and some attempt to retreat, turning the corridor into a tangled mess. With the column locked up, Ukrainian FPV drones lock onto the stalled armor and beam real-time target coordinates directly to artillery batteries. Heavy artillery then rains down on the great stalled corridor, piling up twisted metal and trapping any surviving armor with absolutely zero room to escape. Within minutes, this mechanized formation is no longer a fighting force, it is just a shooting gallery. Minefields and narrow choke points are the absolute killers here. Once a column loses momentum, they turn a temporary halt into permanent, fatal paralysis. As the Russian armor pushes deep into these dense minefields, the first blast rarely wipes out the whole force, but it instantly rewrites the battlefield calculus. A shattered tank or troop carrier usually grinds to a halt sideways, blocking the only clear lane, which instantly cages every vehicle behind it in a tight kill zone, with no way around. Heavy armor cannot risk veering off these established paths because the surrounding terrain is either soft mud, deep craters, or packed with hidden mines, and attempting a detour only guarantees more catastrophic losses. Once that lead wreck blocks the path, the column is sliced in two. Rear elements are forced to halt while forward units are already burning. Panicked crews try to read the field through blinded optics, but heavy smoke and dust choke their view, crippling their response time. Combat engineers and recovery rigs are stuck too far back to help, and sending them forward under direct fire is suicide. As minutes tick by, spacing completely collapses as trailing vehicles bunch up for cover, tightening the trap. What started as a rapid assault is now just a packed mass of metal with blocked lines of fire and zero room to move. We are reporting that the hostile column has ceased maneuvering. In this theater, sitting idle under active drone surveillance is a fatal mistake. Ukrainian operators spot this freeze instantly. Stalled armor means static, highly predictable targets that are ripe for precision strikes. Our artillery crews are receiving locked-in coordinates. As you and I monitor this feed, accuracy climbs with zero need for adjustment. FPV drone teams now have the tactical luxury to pick their entry vectors and strike points on these immobile targets. This synergy effectively turns an active armored threat into a shooting gallery of static targets. Every hit compounds the bottleneck, as burning wreckage physically seals off any remaining escape route. Violent secondary explosions from cooked-off ammunition rip through the corridor, showering the area with shrapnel and flame. Crews trapped in intact armor face a brutal choice: stay inside and risk the next strike. Ultimately, we are seeing panicked crews abandon their multi-million-dollar vehicles to flee on foot into the tree line. The longer this bottleneck holds, the faster their remaining options for escape or recovery vanish. Desperate attempts to bulldoze through the wrecks are failing under heavy fire, as heavy armor cannot be easily cleared while targeted. Backing out is a tactical nightmare. Zero visibility and cramped space trigger instant collisions and catastrophic mechanical failures. As unit cohesion completely breaks down, individual crews panic, shattering what remains of their tactical chain of command. We see some tanks trying to reverse, others shutting down systems to hide, and many retreating in absolute chaos. This total lack of coordination makes it even easier for Ukrainian targeters to isolate and destroy them one by one. Once pinned, the main force can no longer protect its vital support elements. Infantry cannot deploy, supply trucks are cut off, command assets are forced to retreat and watch from a distance. This massive assault is not failing due to one wonder weapon, but because rigid tactics trapped them. Let's look closely at how coordinated Ukrainian fire becomes devastatingly lethal in these moments. Heavy guns hammer the center of the trap, while attack drones strike the flanks to shut down any breakout attempts. It is a relentless, layered assault designed to systematically dismantle the entire unit piece by piece. With every blast, their combat power plummets, yet they continue to push blindly into the meat grinder. This brutal imbalance shows us how the assault collapses, as casualties skyrocket, while their strategic objective remains completely out of reach. Minefields alone do not win battles, but they funnel the enemy into perfect kill zones for precision artillery. When a mechanized force gets stuck, their massive size transforms from a major strength into a massive liability. In this arena, heavy armor and speed mean nothing. The battlefield mercilessly punishes any unit that stops moving. Swarms of FPV drones and fierce counterattacks signal the end of these battles. Once Russian lines shatter, fleeing becomes just as lethal as trying to push forward. As trapped columns attempt to tuck tail and run, swift killer drones transition from scouts to active hunters. Actively hunting down any armor that shows signs of life, these kamikaze drones fly low, striking from blind spots, tearing into weak engine bays, exposed hatches, and thin rear armor plates. One clean strike can easily disable a tank that withstood heavy artillery. Destroying the engine or crew hatches completely kills any hope of recovery. As vehicles go up in smoke one by one, escape routes vanish and panic spikes among surviving crews. With every explosive hit, relentless drone overhead presence forces rapid, desperate choices, but every single attempt to reposition exposes fresh vulnerabilities. Stop to check damage and you are pinned. Rush forward into the chaos and you risk hitting minefields or new ambush points. Simultaneously, drone-corrected artillery plays a critical role, shaping the exact airspace where these attack swarms operate. Our crews adjust fire missions instantly to close all exits, scatter regrouping units, and block incoming reserves. This tight coordination of drones and heavy artillery ensures the enemy cannot recover from their opening losses. Ukrainian forces close in. Subscribe for updates. Forces are transitioning to active operations. Western armor, specifically Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, is entering the grid, serving as targeted support assets rather than blunt breakthrough tools. Their mission: suppress localized resistance, lock down key positions, and shield advancing infantry as they secure and hold the objective. These platforms maneuver cautiously, utilizing defilade and short bounds instead of reckless charges, prioritizing total operational control rather than raw speed. Direct fire from these assets is hammering enemy structures, tree lines, and suspected hostile positions threatening our frontline troops. Integrating these tactical units is synchronized with live drone feeds, guiding maneuvers and slicing through the fog of war at close range. Command staff exploits this aerial reconnaissance to coordinate advances and pauses, minimizing lethal exposure to hidden enemy threats. On this front, Western armor's value comes down to precision and reliability, not sheer numbers. They deliver heavy fire support, armored mobility for ground forces, and a clear tactical sign that the initiative is shifting. But make no mistake, they cannot operate in isolation, as their combat lethality hinges on the same drone network anchoring the entire operation. Drones cut off retreat, heavy artillery shatters regrouping forces, and armored backing crushes local resistance. Every tactical layer seals the gaps, leaving zero escape routes for enemy units caught in the pocket. On this battlefield, victory is forged not by cinematic clashes, but by ruthless, continuous domination of terrain, timing, and direct visibility. Smoldering heaps of destroyed armor and failed, stalled mechanized thrusts now expose a grim tactical reality that neither side can ignore. Massive high-speed armored assaults are slamming directly into a modern battlespace defined by total unyielding surveillance, lethal minefields, and pinpoint artillery. Across this sector, reconnaissance drones spot all movement instantly. Choke points strip away maneuverability, and precision strikes punish any hesitation, turning numerical superiority into a deadly bottleneck. We are not witnessing the death of the tank, but rather the death of employing armor as a blunt instrument relying solely on momentum. Command of information, precise timing, and multi-domain coordination now outweigh how many hulls we put in the dirt. This evolution subjects both high commands to a brutal test. The Kremlin must rapidly overhaul its doctrine to survive relentless drone threats, or keep feeding old tactics into the meat grinder with devastating losses. Kyiv faces a parallel crisis. Since fueling an operation dependent on drone superiority and high-tech munitions demands endless supply lines, the strategic dilemma remains unsolved. Is this gridlocked attrition the future of conflict, or merely a brief transition before the technological scale tips once more? Drop your tactical assessment in the comments below. For frontline sitreps, cutting-edge hardware analysis, and deep-dive theater strategies, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force. Over and out.